Hello again, Simon, and welcome to 2018, and the impact narrative is ready to roll again.
It is. We are picking up steam, Mark.
We're picking up
steam rapidly.
I think you put something fizzy in that thing to make it seem like you should have dry ice coming out of your cup.
I think we can do that in the post-editing.
You
Post-production.
Can you Photoshop some dry ice? Because picking up steam would be. It's in there. It's in that Arsenal mug.
It is.
And we'll talk about that later. So,
Mark, how have you been?
I've been in good form. Perhaps what we should do is recap for new listeners and viewers what the impact narrative is all about.
I think
that's to remind ourselves.
It's been a while. It's been a year. Some might say.
The calendar. We've got
Indeed,
a totally different calendar.
But anyway, the impact narrative, Mark. I guess what we're trying to do is to engage with topics that are in the news today. Have a bit more time to get underneath the skin of stories that are happening in the world, and do it at a slightly more leisurely pace than what we're used to.
Yes, and generally burble on about things that come into our minds.
Well, that goes without saying, I imagine. Anyone who's heard us talk previously or seen the show before will know that
burbling is very much to the fore. So, Simon,
Indeed, yes.
What have you been up to recently?
Well, Mark, I'm on sabbatical.
Sabbatical? What's that?
A very exciting and a great opportunity, increasingly rare in this day and age.
Indeed.
It's not, I should say, a 10-week holiday.
No, it's 9-week holiday.
Well, it's a 9-week holiday from teaching, yeah. No, I have...
oh dear, that sounds wonderful. How can I apply?
Well, I don't know anymore, Mark. I do not know.
Right.
But it's an opportunity where teaching and administrative roles are removed from you so you can focus entirely on your research.
Which is why you're here and why this morning you were having a chat with somebody who's probably a PhD student.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yes,
so,
exactly. This is why I'm here and why I'm going on to have more meetings today and why I have my PhD group and a book club. So, yeah.
Book club?
Very quiet.
We could talk about maybe books a little bit later.
We certainly will.
Good.
And I'm currently writing 2 of them, Mark, which is very exciting.
And so what's your way of doing that for posterity? I mean, you kind of ambidextrous and
2 screens, 2 hands, 2 keyboards.
That would be great, wouldn't it? Be like Kraftwerk. You won't remember Kraftwerk, but
I am aware of Kraftwerk. Remembering them is perhaps no. Did you see Kraftwerk? You've seen everyone else from that era?
No, even I'm too young to have seen them at their pomp.
Wow.
But anyway,
okay,
enough of that. We've touched on Kraftwerk, which shows the cultural, the kind of cultural hinterland that you and I both can draw upon. Rich.
Indeed, but
you
say hinterland, it's also the zeitgeist. Kraftwerk is...
Probably.
It's cool now, I think.
Is it? My word. Well, it's kind of cyclical. It's a bit like Nietzsche's law of eternal return, that
Indeed.
Kraftwerk will always be popular. In 10 years, there will never be a 10-year period in which Kraftwerk is not trendy.
Of course, that rule brings with it the likes of Poison, Bon Jovi.
Right. I think I've heard of these people.
Aerosmith.
And the adverts.
And Def Leppard and all of the dire stuff that came with classic rock.
Other opinions are available on these things.
They are, but they would be factually inaccurate.
But actually, this reminds me, though, when we used to be on the radio, in the dark days before technology arrived, I mentioned that the the rhythm guitarist of the adverts, a punk band of the 70s, which I liked an awful lot, was buried in Carnforth.
You did,
and
yes.
Now we've got a global reach with our show. Perhaps it's not the time to bring this up, but any viewer who happens to know the whereabouts, the last resting place of Howard Pickup, whose real name was Howard Boak, that would be. I was just thinking about him the other day because I've just got a deluxe CD of the adverts. Ooh. But anyway, that's part of the zeitgeist. They haven't come back every 10 years.
Probably every 11 or 12.
Maybe. Yep. Anyway, so you're on sabbatical.
I'm on sabbatical.
I'm finishing various projects.
Excellent. How many?
2 books are in various stages, and done a chapter for another book and various things.
Excellent.
So we're working. We're keeping out of mischief.
We are beavering away.
We are indeed. So what's the running order for today?
Well, Mark, I think there's a good opportunity, this being the first show of the year, to simultaneously look forwards and backwards.
Wow.
I thought it might be a good idea to look at what we missed over the Christmas break.
Okay.
Quickly, but also to look forward to what's coming this year. There's a lot ahead of us. It's a big year in the political calendar.
Yeah.
Big year in the sporting calendar.
It is.
And then obviously a lot to cover in terms of this week. So, is there anything in particular you want to touch on over the Christmas break? Anything that happened that you thought was worthy of discussing?
I think probably it's since our last broadcast that England lost the Ashes, and
We did what?
yeah, the Ashes were
Right.
lost. But
Does
since
anyone
then,
know where?
no, I think it was in Australia.
Right.
I think it was.
Seen.
Yes, and the thing is, obviously, there's going to be lots of inquiries about this because the Australian, they developed this kind of strategy which was so unfair that they kind of ran in and they bowled the ball fast. And the result was, it's just very unfair because our bowlers, our batsmen just aren't used to that kind of thing. So it was grotesque.
It was.
A travesty of sporting. And of course now, it's bizarre. We seem to get, in one day, in other words, in a 50-over match, we seem to get far more runs than we get when we've got a whole 5 days to bat. And I know there are reasons for this, like the fielding places are different and all that kind of thing. But even so, you would have thought. So what's happened is that the England team has obviously really given up on test matches because they're, boring. And they want to be absolutely useless at test matches in future so they can concentrate on one day.
And earning lots of money when they go and play in the Indian Premier League.
Indeed.
Perhaps.
So that was one thing. And Carl Edmund,
Yes.
we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? Carl Edmund flying the flag for Britain. He's English, and so the mixed feelings some people had about Mr. Andrew vote for independence, Murray. We can celebrate a Yorkshireman, but we did, I think, that probably he predicts he's going to get at least 15 points in his semi-final against...
Before being caught at slip. That was
and then he's going to skew one off the frame of the racket and is going to be caught somewhere in deep mid-wicket.
Right. Not cow corner.
No. Cow corner implies that he's got some strings on it.
Sure.
So that's sport out of the way. And Arsenal are doing very well. They seem to have attracted a new player from Manchester United.
We have. Moving on.
Yes, and tonight they are going... But are we going to predict? Predictions for tonight?
No, we are not. We're going to move on swiftly.
But no, the funny thing is, it looked like the shackles had been taken off Arsenal. They scored 4 goals in the first half against Crystal Palace, who are one of the form teams at the moment. So, I'm whereas Chelsea, maybe a troubled team, I'm quietly confident that there'll be a football match.
I'm quietly confident that Arsenal will lose about 3 or 4-0.
Okay, there's the prediction.
So there it is. Okay, so that's
so now
looking back. What about the present? What's caught your eye in the past couple of days, Mark?
Well, the past couple of days, I'll do my bit very quickly and we can get on with yours. Boris Johnson is being very interesting.
He is.
And, 2 things, and not in the last 2 days, but in the last kind of week, I guess. The first one was that he was going to build a bridge over troubled waters.
He was.
And I thought I thought this is completely bonkers. It isn't, because...
It isn't?
It's a bonkers idea, and of course he was immediately shot down in flames by Downing Street. There are no plans to build such a bridge and that kind of thing. But first of all, it gives the impression that he thinks big and he, prestige projects that are completely unworkable, that kind of thing. But the other thing is of course that it's underlining the thing he's always said, that he doesn't want to be in the EU, but he's really keen on Europe. And Monsieur Macron, President Macron, seemed to be taken with the idea of a bridge. And so that kind of almost worked, I think. But then the other more...
We should just mention, of course, he has form in proposing seemingly ridiculous bridges. The Garden Bridge over the Thames was...
And of course Boris Island.
Of course.
Which wasn't a bridge, but it was an island. Reclaimed from the sea, I think, was it, or something? It was going to be.
The plan was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this man thinks big, and therefore, if you want somebody with vision, then he's your man. But then he also
impractical vision, some might say, but
yeah, but
vision nonetheless.
And but the other thing, and more obvious, was the. He can obviously brief the press about things he's going to do because he's got so many friends in the press, particularly the Telegraph, and that he was going to go into cabinet and say, we want £100 million a week for the NHS, which of course computes as about 52 5.2 billion. I got there in the end. It was just the figures.
Cogs working quickly.
And Jeremy Corbyn has promised 5 billion extra for the NHS. So when 100 million, he's thought, oh, what worked in the referendum? We said a large sum per week, and people went crazy and forgot their rational faculties. And so I'm going to do the same thing again, but it also, of course, you see what he's done, a kind of a double thing. One was a big vision for the future. The other one is, I'm in touch with the real concerns of the British people. Labour is always making capital on the NHS. Let's seize this issue, make it a Conservative issue. Vote Johnson. We're not going to call him Boris. And the Conservative Party is going into the sunny uplands of the future, whereas under the present regime, it's clearly heading for an electoral defeat.
Now, doing my preparation for this podcast, this vidcast,
right,
whatever one may call it, as I always do, I came across an article that suggested that if this was not to happen, if this sum of money was to be rejected by the Cabinet, then Mr. Johnson would be forced to resign. And
really?
he's even talking about resigning if the money doesn't come through.
Yeah, but that's the other thing, sorry, I forgot to say, and we don't want to take up too much time on this very sad subject, but in the reshuffle, which we could have talked about, I did a few radio things about, very interesting reshuffle indeed, but it was obvious that the Prime Minister would have liked to have got rid of Boris Johnson at that stage, and because she didn't, he now thinks is unsackable, and that means that he can use his position as a cabinet minister to say an awful lot of things which are basically designed to advertise his claims to be Prime Minister.
Right.
And Philip Hammond, quite deadpan sort of way, pointed out that he was Foreign Secretary rather than Health Secretary. But the fact is that cabinet discipline has completely broken down, and that reshuffle we spoke about before, where Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, basically refused to move, which is unheard of, and Justin Greening refused to move, and said, right, well, I'm going to leave the cabinet if I can't keep the job that I want. And both those individuals basically showed that the cabinet government at the moment is in suspension. So we talk about the White House being in disarray, but clearly the disarray has spread across the Atlantic. And finally,
it's contagious with the American Secretary of State, Mr. Tillerson, visiting London.
Right. Well, he's spread the infection.
Yes.
And the final thing is obviously that now all the talk seems to be that we're going to get a soft Brexit. It's just the whole thing is incredibly what's the word? Dangerous, I think, because. Again, it's not being explained to the public, and politicians are still posturing, and various people are making noises about a hard Brexit, but it does seem that people like Macron and the Irish government expect it's going to be a soft Brexit, and how it's going to be explained. And this is where the last thing I'll say, Nigel Farage saying that there should be a second referendum, people thought that was maybe a little bit strange of him to do that, but the Remainers have wanted a second referendum on the deal because they thought that was an opportunity to get people to look into reality, which that strange land that so few people see, and to basically change their mind about the whole Brexit idea. But I could see, in fact, that for what Farage is thinking is that it's going to be the worst of all worlds. In other words, we won't be members of the EU, we won't be able to influence policy, but we will have to accept EU policies, a kind of Norway-ish type thing. And so second referendum will be a chance for the British people to say, we want no deal.
Right, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, makes sense. Well, that's a nice little segue, Mark, into another story that I think we must touch on.
Okay.
Mr. Henry Bolton.
Oh, we're doing domestic stuff.
I think
okay.
so. I mean,
over to you, mate.
There's a couple of things that we might want to touch on internationally, but I think a lot's happened in the UK recently. A lot's been happening in British politics and British sport.
Yeah, I think UKIP is more under the rubric of entertainment, isn't it, than politics now?
In entertainment news,
yes, yeah, but
Henry Bolton,
I mean,
has announced his separation / recoupling / conscious
uncoupling. Yeah,
I don't know
whatever happened to conscious uncoupling.
Stage they're at now, but
no.
But let's just briefly touch base with what Mr. Bolton has done. So, the new leader of the UKIP party. He
newish.
Well, newish, I guess.
I mean, for UKIP standards, he's a veteran.
Well,
he's lasted more than a few days, which Diane James.
Pushing what, 3-4 months now?
Yeah, I mean, we're all getting a little bit. Time for a change is the cry that's gone up from the
from the
The
members
legions
of the.
of UKIP.
Yeah, well, so his girlfriend, I believe,
Yes.
had tweeted or texted something about
Yeah.
something about the royal wedding and her concerns about Miss Markle's
Well,
background.
yeah. We're dancing on the edge of a
We are.
volcano
We
here.
really are, but
Yeah, but this program is a
Fleet
great
footwork.
fan of Meghan,
yes, very much.
and I think we were just about the first to come out in support.
Oh, definitely so. We were talking her up.
This is
even
one
on
of the things. This
on the radio.
This program has no views really on most of the things,
other than
other than Alistair Cook's ability to get out, caught in the slips, either 200 not out or
240
or
odd.
naught. But we have views on Meghan Markle.
Very positive views.
Indeed.
Yes, but Mr. Bolton's girlfriend made some rather awful,
Okay.
abhorrent remarks.
Well, that's your opinion.
They are
Controversial.
and I will stand by them. And then Mr. Bolton said that he had ended the relationship, except he hadn't,
Oh.
and it was they were later photographed together.
Yeah, but they might have been discussing the
And-
post, the Brexit or whatever they have, some divorce settlement
Possibly,
where,
yeah.
a trade deal between them. Maybe tariffs or whatever, maybe a soft separation
Perhaps.
where they, continue to, he continues to lay down certain regulations that she
But then he
has
said
to
that he
follow.
was going to get back together with her, and then there was a great deal of confusion. But
Love's great.
amidst all of this, there was a lot of criticism from the members of his party, from the grassroots. A lot of people were resigning,
They were.
and yet he said no. He said he will not resign.
Yeah.
And instead he went on a tour of local media stations and national media stations.
He didn't ask us to appear.
He didn't.
He might
Probably
pay
for the
for that
best.
later on. Yeah. So anyway,
And,
so you thought that was interesting. I mean,
Well,
it's
the
UKIP.
question is, why do we care? Why is this news?
Well, UKIP at the moment, obviously a party on which we have no views, and these kind of controversial things are not representative of the average UKIP voter. However, they are, I think, at 3% in the opinion polls at the moment, which is quite surprisingly high, since a Conservative Party is now UKIP to all intents and purposes.
Exactly.
And they have had a kind of a identity crisis since the referendum, which they precipitated.
Sure.
So your point was?
My point was, why is this news? Why are quite serious radio stations, including one that we both admire, why are they covering Mr. Bolton's love life? Why is this a story? Why should we care?
Yeah, no, well, it's human interest. As I say, love is great, and it brings everyone, put a smile on people's faces to hear that, love will endure. Things like tweeting a bunch of opinions which may be somewhat out of touch with certainly this programme's view of the
footwork, Mark. That footwork is incredible.
Thank you. So anyway, yeah, I agree. But then media, are you implying, Simon? Now let's put this on record. You're implying that media values may be at variance with the real importance of stories. So, for example, on the day that Mr. Bolton was touring all these studios, things may, perhaps chemical gas or whatever, may have been happening in a country of the Middle East, and that didn't really deserve quite so much coverage as the.
Well, I'm no media producer, Mark, so I couldn't possibly comment on this.
But the other thing is, with this kind of story, of course, that there'll be an awful lot of people gleeful because it's basically pushing the UKIP down the road to oblivion. The media love stories of division, and this is the thing that we'll wrap this up very quickly. But the Labour Party obviously had a succession of shadow ministers resigning almost the day they were appointed because of Mr. Corbyn. So this kind of mass desertion thing, Mr. Corbyn didn't resign, it seems to me. Mr. Bolton hasn't resigned either, so he's following in august footsteps. And you might say, come in, Agent Bolton, your work. Well, no, your work is done, because it obviously won't do. But it's time. I think it's time for a fresh face at the top of UKIP. And I've got my eye on this chap. He's got a foreign-sounding name, but he's got a background in the city.
Right. Okay.
Farage, is that? Fromage.
Fromage.
Oui.
Très bien.
I think it's time to give him a go.
A good go.
I saw on our favourite programme, the Radio 5 Live, there was people in when he said this thing about a second referendum.
Yeah.
The BBC, which is totally unbiased, went to places in heartlands of UKIP support and were hoping that the UKIP supporters would say, "I'm disgusted, how dare he do this?" But instead, all these people lined up to say, "He should be Prime Minister." Sorry, that's a stereotype voice of "he should be Prime Minister." They were saying.
Excellent.
Yeah, and well, it shows that perhaps the UKIP phenomenon is still. There's certainly the causes of that phenomenon have not gone away
There's
at
still
all.
motion.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
Moving on. We are rapidly running out of time, Mark.
Yeah, so no time for the Middle East. It's media values being.
Yeah, I think that's important. And obviously, there's a lot been happening in the Middle East: protests in Iran, allegations of chemical weapons, and perhaps we can being used in Syria. Perhaps we can discuss those in more detail next week. But the other story that I wanted to briefly mention is that Lily Allen has been in the news again.
This is domestic.
It is.
Well, yeah, okay. She's been tweeting. This is.
She did tweet, but
you're being inconsistent, Simon.
apologise.
I've hardly heard. I mean, I think she's quite a sparky kind of individual, isn't she?
But she was taking issue with Transport for London.
Ah, right.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
I do. I can see it going down the tracks towards. Yeah. Okay. You're wasting time.
I am. Precious seconds. So Transport for London yesterday, or this morning, I'm not entirely sure exactly when it was, but they had written on one of their boards.
It was scheduled to be 10:15 yesterday, but it arrived at 11:45.
On one of their boards that they used to write inspirational messages, they had written that on this day in 1879, 150 proud British warriors held off a mass of 15,000 Zulu warriors.
Yes, at Rorke's Drift,
Indeed.
I imagine. That was kind of a guess.
It was Rorke's Drift.
Right.
So they were commenting on this, and Lily Allen had taken issue with it, suggesting that this was in fact celebrating the successes of colonialism.
Right. And of Michael Caine.
Indeed. You're only supposed to blow the... No, that's
stereotype language. That's making him sound a bit sort of southern.
It is. Oh, I do apologise.
Use a non-discriminatory voice. You're only supposed to blow the bloody... Anyway, go on.
But I think, again, it raises something that we had discussed in great detail on a number of occasions in our radio show.
Right.
This idea of this colonial legacy and the extent to which things can and should be discussed or not. I mean, should there be a reference to historical events that are part of a pretty dubious colonial past? And obviously she's been very outspoken about this reference to the...
It's a funny anniversary for them to pick, isn't it? It's gratuitous. It's almost like they did want to celebrate some glorious exploit of the British Empire, just for the sake of it.
It's odd.
But they wanted to raise our consciousness. They wanted to provoke Lily Allen in particular into making a comment which will provoke a debate. And great books like Ronald Hyam's book about the declining British Empire will be read, because it's a story everyone needs to know.
Should be read.
So I think we should, because I thought all this story was going to be about seating arrangements and discrimination against people with back issues on transport.
That's for another time.
I was quite wrong.
Well, sorry about that, Mark.
So yes, well that's interesting, but I'm afraid I listened to the wrong radio stations because they didn't talk about that on mine.
Oh, I got that from the...
From Twitter?
From the newspapers.
Right, that's yesterday's stuff. So, Book of the Week?
And I guess The Guardian has changed its form.
It has.
The Guardian is no longer a broadsheet.
That's right.
Book of the Week.
It is, yes, okay, Book of the Week.
Yes,
Am I going to
cutting edge.
I talk too much.
No, you should definitely do this, as you have read it, and I haven't.
I've read quite a lot of it. Well, the reason is because Simon, this book, hot off the press 47 years ago, is it? I think that's actually right. 48 years ago. This book is kind of a wonderful thing to read now, to see how many predictions of Toffler have come true. But I remember one thing really vividly. I actually wrote a novel when I had nothing to do after my first degree.
Well, this is very exciting. And where can one read this novel?
It's in a drawer in my room gathering
So it
dust.
still exists?
Yes.
What's the title?
It's called Repent at Leisure.
Okay, and give us a brief synopsis, Mark, please.
We haven't got time, unfortunately.
But we can do an impact narrative special because I'm sure everyone would
serialise
love.
it. Yeah,
to
yeah.
hear.
But anyway, it was based around a quotation, a bit of Future Shock. This
Right.
book, where Toffler talks about his daughter. And his daughter was given, he gave her some money to go to the shops, and she came back a bit later and didn't seem to have bought anything. And he said, "What's happened?" And she said, "Oh, the shop's been torn down." I remember you used that
Right.
actual phrase. And she was completely not unmoved by this. And Toffler said, "Right, well, when I was a kid, if I had been given some money to go to the shops and had found that the shop was closed unexpectedly, I'd make a right fuss about it. I'd come home and say, 'Oh, shop's closed.'" But his daughter just
Went
thought...
on Twitter and posted a...
No. Well, she did nothing.
Retort.
She just came home, and it's because what he's saying is that the transience of our landscape is something that generation of children just accepted. Whereas for us, it seemed that landmarks were permanent fixtures, whatever. And I think that's very interesting because that child obviously would be born in the 60s, would be about my age now or whatever. And there's been further generations down the line who've got even more attuned to
Exactly,
the new.
yeah.
I mean, we look at our campus, glorious campus, which is University of the Year, and things are changing. Rapidly. There's been scaffolding around this campus. Not that it's affected the quality of the
things are
teaching.
changing rapidly.
Yes, is
Yes.
that right? I think grammatically that's.
Oh, no,
but anyway,
I'm not taking issue with your grammar. The subtitle.
things are changing. Things are rapidly changing. Change is rapid. Do you want me to be Yoderish? Change
Indeed.
rapid is
One
happening.
must rapid change. The subtitle of this book, I think, is quite interesting.
Yes,
A study of mass bewilderment in the face of accelerating change.
indeed.
So I'm going to have a look
It's
at this
grammatical.
book this week. And,
Right. Yeah.
something to discuss.
No,
next
it
week,
is. It's a
perhaps.
great book, and this is the thing about books on our subject, which get supposedly out of date. They're never
Yeah.
out of date because you can learn a lot about the assumptions that informed them at the time,
Yeah.
and you just say, right, oh wow, it's all different now, and it makes you think about now as well as the past.
Exactly.
So it's our book of the week, 48 years on.
Indeed. Yeah. Cutting edge.
Indeed.
So, on that note, Mark, I think we need to wrap this up.
Tide
It's-
times?
Tide
No.
times.
Tide times, the
are
tide
moving.
will come up and down. It's one of those things that never changes.
Indeed. Tides will come, tides will go.
Different times though.
Indeed.
And
Mark?
there's always that moment of exhilaration when you find out when the tide's coming in and when it's going to go out.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you as always. We'll be back next week with another issue of the
Impact narrative.
narrative.